Well, looks like the election is moving towards what was the predicted result, but many of you were still surprised and maybe disappointed by the way it all happened. After all the votes are counted, it does look like it will be a victory for Joe Biden, but this was no landslide, no collective repudiation. It's more clear than ever that this country is deeply split, and we're quite emotional about it. This is not just about politics. Each side feels as if they are existentially threatened, angry, dug in. Well, here's the good news. These high stakes did bring out a record voter turnout. Biden will end up with more votes of any presidential candidate in history ever. But you should know that Trump will end up with the second most votes of any candidate in history ever. So half of this country is feeling deeply upset tonight by the projected results of this election, to the extent they accept the results at all. But even the half that thinks that we will win is distressed. I might even say horrified and shocked that millions of Americans voted the way that they did. And our surprise actually necessitates a kind of reckoning, because we missed it again. We did not really listen again. Let's put aside President Trump for the moment. I know we have a lot of strong feelings there. I want to talk about the huge number of Americans who voted for him. How could so many people be so unaware of the strength and even the breadth of President Trump's support? I know I certainly ignored some of the signs, like the conversation I had with my housekeeper, Natalie, a religious woman from the Philippines who attends a Catholic church in Queens. She told me that she doesn't care much for Trump, but that the rest of her church is voting for him. And I was incredulous. I said, "Isn't your church filled with Hispanic and Asian immigrants? How are they voting for him?" She said, "Abortion." While this was not enough to win her over, she was not surprised that this single issue was strong enough to justify all of their votes. Or the notes that I've received from some of our congregants who believe that Trump's actions in Israel and in fighting anti-Semitism here at home are not only admirable, but protect our very survival. The question bothering me, one asked when discussing Biden supporters, is how American Jews can vote contrary to God's will, contrary to what is good for our own security. So many people in my bubble had it wrong, because we were quite committed to believing that those people voting for the other side were not our people. They could not be anyone of color or anyone with an education. Both sides made disparaging caricatures of the other. It's enough to give you whiplash. Those people were selfish, rich folks voting out of their pocketbook. Those people were woke liberals oozing with their moral superiority. Those people were pro-Israel Jews excusing Trump's stroking of white supremacists. And those people were social justice Jews putting anti-racism ahead of anti-Semitism. No longer were people who checked the other box people that we just disagreed with. No, they were evil, morally bankrupt, racists, naive, classists. Somehow it felt righteous to label them that way, and it even feels good to cut them off. As one of my Facebook friends decried, and this was not dissimilar from a lot of things I read, he said, "The idea that nearly 70 million Americans who lived through the same 4 years as I have wanted to see this continue has wrecked me. I can't think. I can't focus. Here's where I'm at. I'm done with those people. I don't care if they're my countrymates, my friends, or even my family. I don't want to hear from them. I don't want to know them. I don't want to share my country with them. All this vilification and name-calling, it blinds us. It's not just about disagreeing vehemently. Disagree. That's what Jews have always done. Fight with everything you've got for what you believe in. But this is about how each side is ignoring, cutting off, and demonizing the other side. And by the other side, I mean half of America. It's dangerous and wrong, and it's not the Jewish way. This week in Parshat Vayera, we have the ultimate story of good and evil. It's the story of Abraham in Sodom. Now, the Torah tells us that this was a city full of people doing morally reprehensible things. God was ready to destroy the entire city, but Abraham, our patriarch and founder of our religion, courageously stands before God and says, "Not so fast." He challenges God and says, if there are even 50 righteous citizens, it would be wrong to destroy this whole city. And God agrees. And when 50 can't be found, well, Abraham bargains God down to 40, then down to 30 and 20, and finally 10 righteous people. Why does Abraham do this? Why does he care so much? He could have just taken the few good people with him and left town. But he is not willing to write off an entire city of people. Even people he feels were doing something wrong. He had the radical optimism to believe that even a small number, a minion of righteous people, could ultimately turn that city around. Abraham never accepted or condoned the Sodomites' bad behavior, but he never stopped seeing them as fellow citizens, as human beings who were worthy of engaging, who could not be discarded. We all, right and left alike, need to do a better job of recognizing the humanity of our political opponents. Now, the danger of demonization comes into really sharp focus this week as we commemorate the anniversary of Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. It was 25 years ago, but for me it feels like it was yesterday. I was a rabbinical student in Jerusalem at the time it happened. I remember hearing the news. It was so surreal. The prime minister assassinated by a fellow Jew at a peace rally after singing Shir LaShalom, the song that I just sang after silent prayer. Israel's political atmosphere at the time was similarly polarized as ours is here today. With the signing of the Oslo Accords just a year before, tensions were very high, and each side felt existentially threatened. The assassin, Yigal Amir, was goaded and encouraged by political leaders, even some rabbis, and a culture that reviled the other side so viciously that Amir could believe that the country's leader deserved death. A small, radical group of Israelis celebrated him for his horrific act and see him as a hero even to this day. But the overwhelming feeling in the streets at the time in Israel was remorse. Candlelight vigils and makeshift memorials sprung up all around the country with signs reading, Ani mitbayeshet, I am ashamed. Israelis took a deep look at the polarizing and dehumanizing rhetoric in which they all participated, that they had all taken self-righteous pleasure in doing, which led to the murder of a Jew by another Jew. It was an amazing thing to be a part of, the profound collective teshuvah of a nation in that moment. Now, 25 years later, the tenor here is eerily familiar. Before we point fingers at the other side, ask yourself, how have I contributed to the tensions and the hate? How have I dismissed or disparaged those people? Could we make this moment one of a collective reckoning? And instead of writing off half the citizens of this country, get curious, start to listen, try to really understand. What makes them care as much as you do? What do they fear? Many people felt that the soul of our nation was in the balance during this election. But the soul of our nation is in the balance now, after this election. It will be shaped by how we see the other, the stranger on the other side, and rebuild a united States of America that does not leave half of America behind. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be so.